Hi, welcome to Pepper Spotlight. Today we are discussing over the topic of language operations and content localization. If you are a brand or an organization who wants to expand globally or regionally, this episode should help you out in every essence. Brands have done some various mistakes in part when it comes to translation or localization. For example, HSBC in the rebranding exercise changed its tagline to assume nothing. In many countries, this was translated as do nothing. HSBC had to spend millions to fix this. This conversation should help you avoid such mistakes. Today, I am talking with Alok, who heads business for language category and localization at Pepper Content. We discuss how, why, what of localization and share intriguing facts and trivia from this billion-dollar industry. Hi Alok, welcome to in-house podcast for Pepper Content, where we discuss different categories, different things that Pepper is doing, different things that content industry is talking about. And today I wanted to discuss about the things that we have launched this week itself, that is our new category in language scene. And I found you as the best person to have in word with, because even I am in the learning phase of it. So with this conversation, I want people who are listening to this, people from the content industry from all over the globe who would be listening to this, to understand more on this topic, that is localization, language operations, and translation. Because in my head, when I joined, translation was localization. I had that confusion for a longer time, because I didn't come from the complete language field. So today, I guess we'll clear the doubts. We'll go deeper in this aspect of what localization means and where it is headed for the future. So I warmly welcome you to this podcast.
Thank you, Yug. Thanks for the warm welcome. And it's really a pleasure to be part of this conversation with you today. So, before we get into the conversation and the details of localization, I'll just set the context a little bit more. So, humans, we all are social beings, and communication is at the centerfold of whatever we do. In fact, today, communicating with prospective customers across the globe or across Bharat in their respective languages is one of the non negotiable cornerstones or aspects of the modern business. Localization of content is more relevant today than ever before. In fact, various surveys tell us that nearly 70% of the population likes to consume content in their native language. So, yeah, like I mentioned, localization is not just translation into another language, it is taking the content to the end user in the form that resonates with them, taking into consideration all the finer nuances of culture, dialect, or the demographic profile of the audience.
Great. uh, I might sound bit immature, but immature in a way that, but I want to know in one, like, few very lines, that agar, if consider me as a college kid and you have to tell me what localization is in the simplest of terms, you can say it in Hindi or English. What is localization? What exactly you're going to talk about for in a very
So yeah,
layman language?
localization actually means उस भाषा में बात करना जो आपको समझ में आती है. And when I say भाषा, it's not just about the language. It's about the way the conversation happens. It's about the way a sentence is framed, considering in mind the demographic profile of the individual. A college goer के साथ the language that will be used will be different to communicate the same thing as against a, let's say, a professional. So keeping in mind the finer nuances of the demographic profile, the dialect, or the kind of persona that the audience has, and these nuances put together make the conversation more effective, and the message or the signal that we want to send across far more potent, and it resonates with the end consumer. So
Yeah.
that is what localization
God.
is.
So if my market, tell me if I'm right. My marketing brain says content customized as per the target audience in some or other way. I could be wrong,
Yeah.
but somewhere I am there in a way that if I'm a college student living in, take it, having my native language in Kannada, I like the localization of that brand in my area would be different to that would target to me, and it will be different in Marathi in Mumbai if I'm right.
Completely agree.
Great.
Yes.
I want to get into the history part to start with. How does this entire thing started? Like in terms of this, take it this topic or this term or someone must be there sitting some years back who thought that digital is growing, there is content growing now. Let's focus in this as a separate topic and not just as a content that we used to create normally. So, what is the history behind localization?
So honestly, and even before I move to history of localization, if you see translations, translations would be probably as old as when we started, when the languages started to grow. In the let's say 500 BC or something, I read somewhere there was a first poem which was taken to various languages.
Hmm.
In around 500th century or odd, Bible was translated into various languages. It started off with Hebrew and then it was taken into various languages. So translation is as probably as old as when the languages came into foray for us as human beings. Localization industry, and there are various thoughts about it. The adaptation of content to various languages, and I'm specifically speaking of content in a marketing sense or a business sense now, started in 1980s with the focus on US software industry when the US software giants pressed the pedal on going global. That is when the actual in actual sense localization was taken to the world, and it developed as a dedicated field. And I'll just throw some light on how it grew over the decades. In 1980s, when the companies started building their own teams within house, they had their let's say global teams as well. So they would use their in-house teams to create content which would help them go global. However, by early 1990s, there was a rise in outsourcing of localization as a concept, with an increase in development of something called as GMS, which is Globalization Management Systems. So that was 1990s when the world was getting acquainted with the concept of outsourcing of localization processes or the localization of content. However, the companies would still work with single vendors back then with the view that the in-house teams are the actual teams who are experts for their specific companies. Early 2000s actually saw the development of something which we now know as the TMS, which is a translation management system,
Hmm.
which have actually helped us scale the localization to a greater extent now. Uh, in fact, now or as we speak of today, the language partners or providers are partners to the business in real sense. So right from 1980s when we started it as a concept to LSPs becoming integral part of the business is how the journey has moved.
Great. In entire thing, like before planning for the conversation, my mind was too much into translation, and my first translation that I remember that okay, companies that started translated things was obviously Google Translate because they launched it in that way. And also I remember one Facebook ad that I always like that stayed with me was Dil Kholo Duniya Khul Jayegi, and it came into Gujarati newspaper like for 1 week, and in ads and everywhere that had written Gujarati way ki Dil Kholo Duniya Khuli Jashe. That is complete Gujarati of that part, and that's where I thought translation wala part that I interacted with the first time. uh, Localization, that one thing you cleared, that localization is the bigger umbrella, उसके अंदर translation और बाकी सब part आते हैं. तो I want to go deeper in that aspect कि exactly क्या क्या part आते हैं, if you can share कि localization means this in a simple terms, कि localization के अंदर ये part आते होंगे.
So when we say of localization of content, it's actually more to do with the various content types which we have. For example, localization includes any text which is written, taking it to various languages. Now, there are certain use cases or types of localization which would be closer to a translation. For example, if there are certain legal documents or there are certain medical documents, etc., they would need to have a far more translated version of those documents rather than localizing it to certain audiences. So that is one type of translation or localization. Another is, let's say, when you have marketing campaigns, they become far more nuanced in a way because they have to speak to the end consumer rather than being technically right. So that is another part of localization. Uh, with the advent of websites, apps, etc., the digital localization in itself has become a full-fledged field, and there's a dedicated resource pool behind that. So there's another category called digital localization. We've seen, and we all are huge consumers of media, digital media. So media content is another field of localization, where which includes subtitling of content, voiceovers, dubbings, etc., or transcription, which is more prevalent in the media medical services. So these all are the various categories or the buckets of localization which are driven in various businesses, etc.
Great. And what kind of organizations or companies uses this more as a service?
So, in fact, any company which is going global, or let's say in Indian context, which is going Bharat,
Regional.
needs
Yeah.
to use this service. So
Okay.
it's an important or an extremely integral part of how the companies operate and how the businesses will grow. For example, media companies, we all know we consume content, and we all like to consume content in the language that we love and understand. So it's a big use case there, and that's a booming industry. Traditionally, medical or software industries, when they go global, they need to have all their documents in place, all the details in place, etc., which are in the translated form. So they've been using this for over the years. With the boom in edtech or fintech in India, we've seen startup ecosystem really booming especially in these two sectors as well. When they decided to go Bharat, they need to have localized content. So
Hmm.
they have a very strong use case of localization. So in fact, any industry that you think of
Hmm.
which presses the pedal on growth needs to have a localization strategy clearly in place.
Got it. To For the people who are not yet for take it this question for the people or the organization people who are not yet using localization, or not finding this as something that they should do. Can we discuss the benefits of it? Like, why should a company? What are the major bullet points in terms of benefits or importance of what all things you gain by going, like, by using localization?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll divide this, or I'll answer this in three crisp bullet points from the benefit lens for the organizations that who want to grow. In fact,
Hmm.
one is it localization helps build a sense of inclusiveness in the target audience, because the audience feels that the communication being sent towards them by the brand is something which they relate to. It
Hmm.
resonates strongly with them. So there's a very strong sense of inclusiveness for the target audience. Second important benefit that it brings is it reduces the challenges associated with the geography association expansion. For example, the companies, and like I mentioned earlier, want to go Bharat or global. The agility is extremely important in business. If you have a defined localization strategy in place, if you have a very strong localization partner who's working with you and who's guiding you towards this growth agenda,
Hmm.
uh, it just reduces the challenges associated with growth. So that is the second most important point. And third is the optimization in search engines. And we know SEO optimization is one of the most important demand generating levers right now.
Hmm.
If you want to go in various geographies, the content that you speak or you take to the market has to be localized. Else, the SEO won't work in an optimized manner for you. So, yeah, these three are the critical impacts that organizations have through localization. And if you want to grow an organization, it becomes an integral part of your strategy.
Can we validate it through some examples, or that any organizations or any company, global or in Bharat, like who went Bharat, you can share that they benefited in some, if there are any data points or any examples that could validate your 3 points.
Yeah, definitely. So, in fact, I'll give two examples. One of a recent disruptor, whom we all know. It's a global brand, but it disrupted a particular sector. And second is how a traditional company has made sure its globalization strategy is in place and is used effectively. So, the first one is Airbnb. In fact, Airbnb is one of the greatest examples how to build a truly global brand in a decade's time and disrupt the existing behemoth hospitality industry. So if you go to Airbnb, they have their app or website translated into or localized in 62 languages. The user generated content, which is the backbone of how Airbnb validates the kind of supply that it has on the system, is localized according to the audience. And in fact, the listings, all the listing pages, etc., and the details are localized for every geography and according to the demographic profile. It's like you take a personalized tour guide on the website or the app. Airbnb has localized content to that extent. It's a personalized tour guide for every person. Is the end game that they're trying to play. Another brand, and like I mentioned, I'll take a name of a huge brand which resonates with everyone is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola has mastered or nailed the art of localization extremely well across their campaigns. In fact, what they do is all of the campaigns that we see from Coke in India, in fact, most of the campaigns are their global campaigns. However, they speak to us as Indians. For example, if you remember, there was a Share a Coke campaign, I think 5 to 7 years back. It was a global campaign, highly customized to the audience of each of the countries. Uh, let's say share a Coke with John in one country to share a Coke with Abraham in another. In fact, they modified Share a Coke campaign for the China launch, since it was culturally inappropriate to take the first name in China. Uh, they modified to share a Coke with your best friend, and so on and so forth. So that's a very strong use case of how localization uh, helped Coca-Cola or helps Coca-Cola.
Great. I remember Coca-Cola's campaign in terms of share a Coke and different campaigns that they had that if you wrap like and wrap the thing, there will be a message or something that you will
Yeah.
share a Coke with buddy or love or a friend, वगैरह वगैरह लिखा
Yeah,
होता है.
in fact, in India, and now in the conversation, I remember Unlock Happiness was their big campaign,
Yes.
which in India they launched as Khushiyon Ki Aasha,
हाँ.
something like that. So
Yeah.
it was a global campaign, a global
Yeah.
jingle, which they took to
Yeah.
India in a complete. Yeah,
I remember the campaign.
yeah.
Great. Now I'm going into more of a how part of thing, that how it works, and I want you to be as simple as you can, that anyone listening could easily understand how localization works. Like anyone want to start, take it a startup person is listening to this who is thinking about starting this as a service or using this getting localized to Bharat part. How could they start? What are the steps they should take? What are the things they should keep in mind, or what are the things they should follow for the process?
All right. So I'll divide the answer into two parts. One is I'll just explain what and how localization works as a fundamental, and how it works within LSP as well. So fundamentally, localization is adapting a piece of content's full meaning for a new region, including translation, associated imagery around the translated content, and the cultural elements to be brought in which influence how the content is perceived. तो basically content को translate करना है, उसके around whatever the imagery is used and how you display the content has to be localized basis the region you're going into. For example, in India would show Taj Mahal rather than a leaning tower of Pisa in the content, and the cultural elements, of course, play a very important part in it. In fact, localization is also about, let's say, when you build a website or an app, the look and feel elements of the website or an app also are part of the localization. It's not just about translating content. Now, how to go about it? For example, the LSPs, how do they work? Traditionally, there is something called, not traditionally, they've developed something called as a translation management system, which is a TMS. What TMS does is, let's say for a website or an app translation, the TMS would integrate with the CMS, which is the content management system of the organization. It'll on the go then keep translating or localization the content which is uploaded on the website or the app. So that is how the starting point of localization will be. From a workflow point of view, they'll have, let's say, an automated layer of a computer translation, then backed by a human layer of post computer translation processing, etc. Then a quality layer which will check the entire elements, etc., and then give it back to the company. So this entire process in a way is automated right now. In fact, the level of automated and AI usage in this industry is growing leaps and bounds every year or so. Yeah.
I hope this helps. And I will continue from the part that where you said the industry, how is using AI and all, but I'll focus more on the part how has this industry grown in terms of, if you can share any data point or anything that what was like in last decade, how was the localization industry, and in future, according to you, from your perception, where are we leading towards?
See, localization as an industry globally, it's a $55 billion industry right now. Uh, a lot of people are not able to comprehend the fact that it's such a
Same.
huge
Yeah.
industry.
Hmm.
Uh, 7 years back, it was around 20 to 25 dollar billion industry, and the projected revenue of this industry by 2027 is going it's going to be around a $75 billion industry. So that's the kind of growth rate that the industry is seeing.
Hmm.
In fact, I also read a stat somewhere that from 2016 to 19, 90% of the content that was created on the online ecosystem by 2019 was created in the last 2 years. So
Okay.
that's the kind of pace
We are
that the
going.
content generation is at. And as the companies go global, localization as a requirement or as an extremely integral cornerstone of the company strategy, it's going to be there. Yeah.
So yeah, if you are listening to this and you still have doubt in terms of if you should start getting into localizing your brand or your work, I guess you should. We'll discuss how you can start, because if you have like if you follow Piper content on any of the social channel, you will know that we have launched a new category of, we handle localization and everything, and we'll get into that part of how you could work with Pepper around that in next 2 minutes. But yeah, I am this data point that you said, even my height is right now wobbling around out, कितना बड़ा है, इतनी चीज़ें इतना चीज़ें हो रहा है. And few things that you shared about Airbnb, when I am introspecting the part ke हाँ, when I was booking that Airbnb in this country, this was in that way, or in Mumbai also it was in that way. So this was quite intriguing part. So I'll just recap what we did. We discussed on the history of localization. We went into the part of what it actually is, why people use it, the benefits of it, and we ended on the part of how, if you are a brand or an organization, want to start into get into localization, how you could start. Now, Alok, I want to discuss, like you more than me, you would be aware about that we just launched our category, and everywhere the entire our brand is talking about how localization Pepper is getting into this category. So please share to people that how can they work with Pepper on this part.
So, with respect to language services or localization services at Pepper Content, we can help you localize any content in any language. So we actually have worked in 40 languages so far in our experimental stage, etc. But we have a very strong supply ecosystem or the creator ecosystem across the board, across the languages, because as a Pepper Content, in our soul we work with a set of freelancers,
Hmm.
and we dip into the pool as and when required, wherever required, etc. So we have an extremely strong pool of creators across the languages. We can help you localize across the content types, be it normal text. Within normal text, let's say there are blogs, articles, books, technical papers, legal papers. So all these various use cases within normal text, we can help you translate slash localize into the language that you wanted to. Then we have something called as digital content, under which we localize websites and apps. And in the media content, as a category for us in localization, we help you localize, or we put subtitles to your videos, we add voiceovers, we do dubbings, we do transcription. So the end-to-end localization uh, categories, Pepper Content actually is ready to
Hmm.
localize for you. In fact, we have a very strong pool of creators, and these creators are equipped with the automated workflow which is designed by our product team, which increases the efficiency as well as the quality of the output. So yeah, we are a full scale language service provider in a way, ready to help you in any of the localization needs.
Great. So we have done our part as an employee. Now I have done the promotion part. I'll come to last question. That is more of a fun or just trivia part, because I know language teams at Peppers keep sharing knowledge nuggets, and you must be much aware about some trivia or facts that blown your mind in terms of some things happened in this industry or around this localization industry in general. So are there any facts? Yeah, this is the last thing. Are there any facts that blown your mind while working in this in this category?
Uh, yeah, so in fact, to begin with, and we were doing some research on why is localization important, and we also covered this in bits during the
Yeah.
conversation. The fact is that only 25% of the internet users in the world are English users. Rest all are non-English users. And another survey tells us 72% of the consumers spend most of their time on websites in their own language. So they love to consume content in the language that they understand. In fact, if I zoom in a little bit to our country, we know around only 10 to 15% of the population is a fluent English user. Rest all are used to using their native languages. 90% of the country's internet users also like to consume content in the vernacular languages. So 90% for an Indian population is just mind-blowing number. In fact, if we go to video industry, 84% of the online video viewers prefer non-English material. So yeah, these are some numbers which just make us more aware of how potent or important the localization industry or the requirement of localization of content is.
These points are quite intriguing for me as well, and some of them I have read in our in the local messages, like the messages that we receive in terms of knowledge nuggets. So yeah, I hope if you are listening this, you had a good time. If you have any questions regarding localization or in terms of working with Pepper for localization part, we are just pinning down Alok's LinkedIn. You could get in touch with him. We are also pinning down Pepper's website. You could just visit the website and get in touch with us. And I hope you had a good time listening to this. We had a good time creating this. I had a good time understanding this industry in a much deeper, much data driven or much intriguing fact part conversations that even I'll be researching more about it, because yeah, this was helpful for me. I hope I had a good time. Thank you so much. I see you in the next episode.